Nous pas besoin d'aller trop loin. Souvent malédiction familiale.
C'est sans qu'à l'écouter, je dis au qu'à flamber.
Oubliez ni à bon Dieu.
Ça c'est sans qu'à l'écouter, je dis au qu'à flamber.
À oublier ni à bon Dieu. C'est pas aujourd'hui nous cap pas les bars. 40 ans, on l'était tout pour pas les sortir. La caille maman. C'est là où ouais où c'est les retés. C'est là où ouais où c'est les morts. Tout ça on fait du nous pour qu'à fonctionner. Belle chambre climatisée, l'auto bien astiquée. Fait comme souffrir, c'est travail ou mon cher. Ou qu'à mentir, qu'on qu'à respirer. C'est pas la vie, bon, mon cher. Mettez gros divin ou vieux frère. Ou qu'à mentir, qu'on qu'à respirer. C'est pas la vie, bon, mon cher. Mettez gros divin ou vieux frère.
Sans qu'à l'écouter, je dis au qu'à flamber.
Oubliez ni à bon Dieu.
C'est sans qu'à l'écouter, je dis au qu'à flamber.
Pas oublier ni à bon Dieu. Pas oublier ni à bon Dieu. Qui a jeté Dieu en l'amour. Au sacrifice il fait banou. Moi comme témoin, est-ce les ouais nous pas bien. Les genoux cassés.
All right, wherever you are at this time, it's about that time. Let me see a special good afternoon, a special greetings and welcome to all of you already locked onto the Civic Vibes Facebook live feed that we're having each and every Sunday from the new time, 5 p.m. It's always a pleasure to be in your company each and every Sunday. Today, Sunday, the 14th of August, 2022 is no different. We're going to have a very interesting program, that is, where we're going to particularly cater this program for the young people, the youth in particular of Dominica. Those of you who are adults already, you can stick around with us. Your guidance, your suggestion, your question, your comments, they are welcome. But we would really, really, truly ask of you now, if you have any young people around you in your home, in your space at this time, please urge them to be part and parcel of the conversation that we're about to have here this afternoon. The topic that we're going to discuss this afternoon is basically asking a very simple question, but it is very important nonetheless. And that question, that ultimate question is just why the young people, our young people in Dominica, they are sort of too disengaged, as it were, where matters of national interest, not matters of national importance where they're being dealt with. So that is the ultimate question that we're going to try to answer this afternoon. So yes, if you have a young person around you, that is a very important time now for discussion of such nature. And I would advise you, seriously that is, to get them around the table of discussion this afternoon. It's already 5 minutes past the good old hour of 5 o'clock, and we have two formidable guests this afternoon, two young people at that, going to extrapolate on the topic for discussion this afternoon. We have Petra Carbon George, that is Mrs. Petra Carbon George. You'll be hearing from her in just a bit in terms of just her opening statements here on Civic Vibes. We have as well accompanying her this afternoon, no stranger to Civic Vibes, no stranger to Dominica, Brother Paul Barron. We heard Paul here already, maybe twice, maybe that's his first time. I suspect, Paul, we might have to induct you in the Civic Vibes family. With your appearances being so many here already. So Paul, good afternoon to you. And also Petra, good afternoon to you as well. These are our two young people we are going to hear from this afternoon. And as well, our fans, our viewers, we always welcome your input. So those of you already here, we have people like Owen Prosper, Stephanie John Baptist, Carol Fontaine, Jane Harry, Carol Ann Ford, Henrietta James. We have persons like Mr. David Joseph out of New York listening and watching. Norma Ito is there as well with us this afternoon. Eliza Luis Gomes, she's there. Aline Luda, and many, many, many more persons will be tuning in with us in just a bit. Ivinia Joseph is here. Gordon Henderson is here as well. Good afternoon to you, Brother Henderson. Stalwart, an icon in the musical business in Dominica. Merlin Alfred Macpherson is here as well. So those of you already here, as I said before, good afternoon and welcome. Please, as we go, you need to share that live. Share that live as we move along so that others too can participate in the discussion that we're going to have here this afternoon. So without further ado, let me move across to welcome to the platform, the Civic Vibes platform, that is Miss Petra Carbon George. First and foremost, Mrs. George, good afternoon to you in a very special way.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lofty. It's a pleasure.
Yes, I had your levels down. Can you just repeat, Mrs. George?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Lofty. It's a pleasure being here.
Good. I'm hearing you loud and clear. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the opportunity to come and speak with us, in particular the young people this afternoon. We appreciate you.
I appreciate the platform as well.
Good. All right. Brother Baron, good afternoon to you as well, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, Loftus, and good afternoon, Mrs. George. Good afternoon to the listening public, both locally and in the diaspora. It continues to be a pleasure to participate and to be on your platform, as I do believe that what you do is absolutely essential and beneficial for the well-being of our country, both politically, socially, and also economically. So I feel very honored to be here today.
All right, Brother Baron, thank you very much for your opening statements here. We always appreciate whenever we ask you, and you always make time to come and speak on our platform, that is the Civic Vibes social media platform, and especially to the young people in particular in Dominica. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Right. Just before we get into the nitty-gritty of things here, let me just give the listening public an idea of just who we are speaking with this afternoon, and the person in the body of Mrs. George. Let me just see if I could pull up a brief bio that she sent here to us so that we could get the conversation going here in just a bit. Let me just pull that up here before we move across. Yes, I think it's this one. All right, just for the information of the listeners and viewers, it says here in terms of a short bio, Mrs. Petra Carbon George. My name is Petra Carbon George, wife, mother, sister, friend, and motivator. I believe that our heart is our priority, and we should always preserve it. I, meaning Petra George, enjoy sporting activities, family time, and meditation. My desire is to become an alternate lifestyle coach, helping others to balance their spiritual path and purpose. So, ladies and gentlemen, you just heard a brief insight as to the young lady that we're going to speak to in just a while. And so I now open the floor, as it were, to have Mrs. George give you guys at least an opening statement in terms of a hi and greetings before we move into the topic. Mrs. George, good afternoon to you once again.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Lofty. It's a pleasure to be here. As you say, my name is Petra Carbon George. I am originally I was born and raised in St. Joseph. My dad is from Capuchin. I had an uncle, which was in Freedom Party time. Alin Carbon was my uncle. So politics to me and knowing things about the country and dealing with that is nothing new. It's part of our culture. And a culture in Capuchin to take care of one another. We love sporting activities. We love helping out each other. We love that thing they used to call, sorry about it. It's not coming to my head, where you just go out, help people, and they come back and give you that help in return.
They call the kudme, yes, the kudme.
Yeah, kudme.
Kudme spirit, the kudme attitude. Yes.
Yes, so this is one of the spirit that I hope that I can bring back to the young people in our community, that kudme spirit where everybody is looking out for everybody. So this is what my intentions are today, to speak to the youth and have that be reintroduced to them.
All right, thank you very, very much. Brother Baron, you have been there with us already. We have discussed a number of situations that pertains to the young people. This afternoon in particular, we are trying to come up with the solutions or some solutions as to just why our young people in particular in Dominica, well, you know, we can maybe extend it to the region, but let us leave it, you know, home as it were. Dominica, we hear of things happening in the country as it pertains to nation building, national matters, be it politics or otherwise. Petra spoke about, you know, the helping of one another with that kudme spirit that we knew before, community activities, and the list goes on and on and on. And for some reason, Paul, there's always the lack of presence of young people in certain aspects where it comes to matters of such nature. We are seeing the same young persons are gravitating towards other things in the society. If you speak to them, they may give you the pro side of it. Some persons see the con side of it. But the first question to your brother Baron is, what can you say in terms of some of our young people being so disengaged? Just why are some of our young people so disengaged? Meaning, some of them are neither here nor there as it pertains to things of national importance.
All right, thank you again for having me. I would want to agree with you that there's a huge disconnect as it relates to young people and their participation in matters of national interest. And that really is not any surprise. Young persons are extremely disenfranchised on the basis that they are not seeing reasonably their needs being met. And of course, the promises that are made therefore for their holistic development are not being tangible enough. And you would expect that once that is the case, there will be a level of disconnect, and there will be a level of them being rather disenfranchised. In youth development, it is widely known that the objective should be to work with young people rather for them. And what that simply means is that in wanting to direct development or to drive growth in and among young people, it would be very necessary to have them involved in the process. What you found is that in most cases, the policymakers tend to make provisions, but without the direct involvement of young persons in terms of their feedback, in terms of their ideas, in terms of the aspirations that they have, and some of the things that they like to see achieved in their various communities and also nationally. And because of that sort of uninvolvement, or rather not meeting them where they are, they see no real need to participate in matters where the national interest is concerned. And we really cannot blame them. Dominica has about near 40% young persons, and that is the largest part of our population strata. What the mandate should be for anyone, any leader, be it religious, be it political, or the likes, is to help bring young persons to the meeting table and to where decisions are being met. In my experience in working with NYC, I saw it necessary to have a grassroots approach to young persons and their development. And by doing that, we were able to go into the communities and meet them where they were, be it on the blocks, be it in schools, be it at their jobs and the like. When we show that level of interest for young persons, it sort of encourages a sense of belonging. And if young persons don't feel belong to an organization, they will see no need to participate or to give direction to it. Therefore, it is notably known that and widely accepted that leadership is everything. And because of that, young persons are interestingly and keenly looking at their leaders and monitoring their behaviors to determine if those leaders in turn are individuals they want to continue to associate with, or they want to have an opportunity to dialogue with. And you know, in most cases, Dominica is the development of Dominica is looked on a period basis. And what I mean by that is, in most cases, you often find that leaders want to engage young persons anywhere in and around an election cycle. And because young persons are smart and they're beginning to recognize that the only time that you do need me, or you want to, so to speak, rub shoulders with me, is at the point at which you need my vote, or which you need my support in order to form a government and to form and to in terms run the affairs of the national affairs of Dominica. And they are aware of those things, you know. So I believe the whole objective for leadership now is to ensure that young persons are being involved at every step of the way and throughout the entire period that is granted to the leaders to govern the affairs of the Commonwealth of Dominica.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Brother Baron, on your opening sentiments here. Just why, you know, some of our young people seem to be so disengaged in the times in which we live in Dominica. As the conversation continues, for sure, I know you will, you know, kind of develop on those points that you just touched on a while ago.
Absolutely.
Sister George, let me pose the same question to you as we, you know, engage you. Just why?
Well, from listening to the youth, one of the, as our dear Baron said, the youth felt that their voices are not heard, and they feel like the only time they are needed, as he rightly said, is during election. And then all these promises was given to them over and over, and then nothing comes out from it after election. So the youths are now saying, you know, being part of something that does not give them any, help them to progress, makes no sense to them. So they just say, they have that attitude, it is what it is now. Whatever happened, it happened. It doesn't necessarily bother us because we cannot change anything. And that's the concept they have, that they think that they cannot change anything. But the truth be told, that the power lies in the hands and of the youth. The youth can make a difference. You see, just because you need me during election time doesn't necessarily mean I have to give you that accommodation. I can choose not to. And one of the things I usually tell the youth is that their voice matters. Your voice is your vote. You vote for what you want to hear or what you want done. And if you put it just for putting it, then that's what you accept. But your voice is your vote during elections. And then there are other platforms you can take. You can call for meetings in your constituency. You can demand that the power rep come to listen to what you have to say. And if action is not taken, then you have rights as a young person in your community. You have rights, and you can demand change in your community, and you can demand a change of parliamentary representative if you want to. There's the laws that accommodate that. But the thing with it is that our youth are not taught these things. So they really live in thinking that they have no power when the power lies within them.
Perfectly said. The power really and truly lies with the young people. And I accept that statement indeed. Just before I move back across to Brother Baron, let me tell our listeners and viewers here that those of you listening and viewing, you can plug in your comments here. If you have a question, a comment, whatever it is, you can plug it in here, and I will try to get it across to the formidable guests here this afternoon for their response. Also, too, I inadvertently forgot to mention this afternoon that the host of the program, Paula Celestine, she's not feeling too well this afternoon, and so she has opted out of the conversation this afternoon. And so our prayers continue to be with Paula, that she gets well very, very soon. Also as well, the second leg of this program this afternoon, Brother Alvin Thomas will be coming in with the usual discussion that we normally have here on the latest report of the CCG. So we can look for that after the first leg of this discussion here. All right, I just wanted to put things in perspective as we move along. Brother Baron, I know you have more to say. The floor is yours.
By all means, just when Mrs. Jordan, I was just lamenting a bit on Dominica, and I often look at Dominica in sharp focus with the past, and it is on the basis that anywhere from the 60s, the 70s, and the early 90s, Dominica was in a very different position. And by that, I mean it was in a position which allowed for a greater sense of community and a greater sense of patriotism on the basis that it was always to grow and to develop. But what you've recognized over the last 20 years is that there has been a deliberate attempt to infiltrate the minds of the Dominican people and to allow for them to pay less and less attention to the things that matter the most. And the fact is that, one, we're Dominicans, and two, we have a collective responsibility towards developing and mobilizing development opportunities for the benefit of Dominica. Dominica is not solely to be developed by the government of Dominica, because that is only one aspect of our development. In that case, public policy. But of course, the private sector is extremely important, and of course, the civil society movement. But what you recognize, and I think your show very well captures that, the fact that the civic responsibility of Dominicans almost seem non-existent right now. And young persons cannot similarly attach any type of significance to civic role and responsibilities. It is simply because they do not know how. And I don't blame them, and Petra is right to suggest that. If you are constantly bombarded with one information which involves a fight between a ruling party and opposition, consistently involving all types of activities, and not focusing on whether, as Dominicans, it is a right and proper thing to have a democratic and free and fair elections, or the necessary or the need for opposition party. If we begin to teach young persons that their role, or as individuals, they have no value, almost simultaneously will be reciprocated onto them. And it is no surprise, Loftus. I mean, you don't go around the street corners, or you don't go into institutions of education and hear the kind of conversation which involves young people talking about national and nation building. I remember when I got what I consider the buzz, or the inspiration to leverage my time, talent, and skills to the greater development of Dominica, was when I was at the Dominica State College. And I remember when I was at the Dominica State College, at that time, we were making the transition from the Clifton Community College into the Dominica State College, and we were part of that ethos. But we were well, how you could say, acculturized or influenced by the lecturers and the professors of the day, such as Colin Baptist, Joshua Francis, and Mr. Boyd, they sort of willingness to serve. And I remember Jai and myself, Kelva, Sajrak Burton, and a few others used to congregate at a certain part of the college and speak about matters of national interest. And in fact, that is what led all of us to be involved actively in politics to this day. But that was only possible because we received at that time the proper stimulus, or rather we received at that time the advice and the counsel and mentorship from the leaders then, to move along in that direction. But you don't find that now. You don't go to Dublin and hear young people talking about, let's build our nation. Why? Because the leaders have skillfully infiltrated their minds for them to concentrate on things that have lesser importance. And if, for example, a drive for materialistic wealth, you have to understand that a country, when it is being developed, cannot be developed at the expense of its social fabric. And I repeatedly say that as much as I get the opportunity to do so. The brick and mortar approach to our development means that we are only looking at things that are visible with our eyes, the roads, the houses, and some of these other type of infrastructural development. But we're not focusing on building holistic individuals from a very young age. If you take, for example, for a lesser example, I would think, because of my views on communism, the people, the Chinese community, they begin to instill these types of civic responsibilities, patriotism, and nationhood at a very young age. In fact, as young as the students can consciously make sense of the world around them. If you look at the Great America, the United States of America, that country to a greater extent always instill the level of patriotism and the level of nationhood that will inspire a citizen to want to do more for this country. It is sad to say that we are on a slippery slope as it regards Dominica's future development. And I'm not talking about concrete, brick, and mortar. I'm talking about building the country to the extent that it will allow us to all feel a great sense of belonging, a great sense of pride and dignity in our country. Even if you look at the question of how we treat the environment, you know, the sense of whether we should keep our environment clean, keep our environment free from disease, and keep even our dwelling places and the places we work and the places that we congregate. We are not teaching the population, or we're not educating the population to have a responsibility for national development. And that is the reason why young persons feel so disenfranchised. And when I speak, I speak for collective, because I would know I have traveled the length and breadth of this country, every single community, every school, every high school, every primary school. And I came to understand there that we were not doing the things that necessitates building holistic individuals. You understand? For example, if you look at even the uptake into the public service, for example, in the education system at schools, the public service is a best option for anyone who wants to develop that level of service. And I remember, if I'm not mistaken, my dear friend, Mrs. Joseph, had told me that once. And when she told me that, it dawned on me, and she said, Paul, the public service, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Mrs. Joseph, P.S. Joseph, it was the financial secretary, Mrs. Edwards. And she told me that I went to her for advice once, and she said to me, the public service is a place whereby it can develop you to an extent that is absolutely good for your future development. So even in the education system, you don't find that in the high schools and in the colleges, students even want to begin to entertain the question of working in the public service. You understand? If you cannot motivate the young population sufficiently to get involved in the public service and in the service to Dominica, then you have a problem. a fundamental one to begin with.
True, true. So I just before we move across to Mrs. George, you mentioned, Paul, that you are, based on what I got from you, you are basically putting some of the reasons why young persons are sort of disengaged. You are placing it solely at the feet of some of the leaders in the country, that they do and say things in a particular way to not have the youth in particular, do things
that is very correct, Loftus. In fact,
uplift.
what I've said lends support directly to what Mrs. George has said. It is what has happened is that over the last, and I am placing this sort of ticking time bomb, or the era in which we lost or dropped the ball over the last 20 years. And I always use myself as a very shining example, because when I got involved in public and service to Dominica, I was 16 years. When I stopped working directly with the state, I was 35 years. That's 20 years. What I can tell you is that the period whereby we dropped the ball was over that 20-year span. And ideally, unfortunately, and unfortunately, if you want to look at it to a more harmful manner, that was the period by which the Dominica Labour Party ruled Dominica. And you can ask our older peers, which is our adults, our older adults, right? If you ask them, they will tell you they have never seen the country at the state at which it is. Many people want to say that, but they're not ever to say this, such as I would, or Petra would, or you would. The period by which Dominica was damned was over the last 20 years span. That's why we are seeking not to allow further the slate of leaders who have the responsibility to manage the affairs of the country to go forward. Because if we continue along the path that we are now, we will find ourselves at a serious pitfall. And it's because when young persons listen to the media and listen to the airwaves, they become aware of some of the comments that are made, the manner in which leaders behave, the things that they say, what they support and what they do not support. And you can ask any young person out there, just ask any young person in any constituency and ask them whether their parent serves as a role model to them, and you'll get your answer.
Yeah, true. That's a very strong point, Paul. I can tell you that for sure. Mrs. George, Paul spoke about in terms of some of the reasons why some young persons are not engaged. The question I want to put to you, you can always piggyback on some things Paul said, but what I want to put to you now, Mrs. George, is we don't want to have the program as if it's an all doom and gloom where young people are concerned. Some young persons, they are doing what they can do with the time and energy resources that they have to help build this country, this rock. What would you want to say to these young people who are trying their best under very trying circumstances, though?
Well, what I want to say to the young people who are trying their best is try to reach out to others who are doing the same and strengthen each other. Because I can tell you, I was in Dominica. I worked under my diaspora for 14 years. I was part of local government in terms of village council. I was part of the Dominica Labour Party, helping with the elderly in my village in Capuchin. So I speak to young people on a regular basis. I was also youth director and assistant director in my church, where we had that youth group, and a lot of people would come and young people who would come and express their feelings and what they feel that not being done and so forth. But for those who keep doing, and I see those who keep doing, but they do it under pressure, because even when something is going wrong, they're still afraid to express themselves about it because they are scared of being victimized, and it should not be so. Everybody is entitled to their own opinions, and just because somebody's opinion does not meet or match your opinion does not mean they have to be victimized for it, because we are all independent people and we have things that we expect the whole community to do at large, and that's what we have to do personally. So for those young people who are striving, kudos to you, and keep doing the good work. Don't make the negative remarks get you down. Yes, you will feel discouraged, but always remember it's for the greater good, because those who cannot speak are looking up to you, because you can speak for yourself and you can do stuff. So just to go back on some of the things Mr. Barron said, it's really amazing. Like for me, example, my husband tell me, you're going to put yourself on national TV. Remember, I tell him, let me tell you, first of all, I feel to myself that now is the time to speak, because just looking over the last 20 years that I was able to take part in politics, because I am 42. So before that, I was only going for the CO. I was not really taking stock of what was happening. When my uncle did the last election in 1995, I was just there to party. When my uncle said we go in there, I jump on the bus and I can't vote, but I want to go places in Dominica. That was what it was about. But as I become a young adult, and then I had
who is that uncle, by the way?
Alan Carbon, my very good Alan Carbon uncle, which I love. And I will tell you one thing my uncle told me that stayed in my head. My uncle had his mom have a house, and then the community was laughing because they said that my uncle was in government and he never built a driveway to her home. So my uncle said that, told me that public resources should not be used for private purposes. To me, that was not making sense, because I'm checking, use the Minister of Communication of Works. But your mother should have a highway, to go in her yard. She should not be passing in track. She should have a big road going to her yard. He said that if there were other people living at the back, other families living at the back that would access that road, it would not be a problem, because it would be development of the community. But to take resources from the government just to build a road for your mom, he don't see that as being a moral thing to do or the right thing to do. So yes, he get a lot of backlash from the community for that. But now I understand, looking back now, I understand where he was coming from, because the state resources is for everybody in the state. And to use it for personal gains, it's not the right thing to do. I will say this and I will leave that there. I'm speaking as a young person. I was in Dominica all the time. My husband is a farmer by profession. And I'll tell you, Lofty, this is when I start not listening to nothing government saying, the official saying. When Hurricane Maria came, my husband had his farm. Now, Maria came, it destroyed everything. My husband from Woodford Hill. I don't go and call his name. He don't like his name to be public. He's from Woodford Hill. He lost everything. Now, the government put some stuff together. They say all farmers will be getting some help to rebuild their field and everything. And I will tell you, I'm not saying what somebody tell me. When he went for help, they said he cannot get help. He does not qualify. He had a big farm and he did not qualify. And people that had backyard garden got things, and he was shipping out of Dominica. He was a huckster as well. So he qualified, in my terms, he qualified to get the assistance because he was bringing in economy in Dominica. Because when he go out to sell in St. Martin and St. Kitts, and then he came in with the money, and he used to help the school with the lunching program, he was contributing. And because he was voting the opposition party, they did not give him anything. He even tell me, Petra, you on your parrot good. Talk to your parrot about it. I tell him, you know what? Because my parrot and I had no problem. We had a good relationship. While I was in village council, anything that the council needed to do for development in our community, I would reach out to him and he would always assist. So I will not say he never did his part when I was there, because me and him had that one-on-one, we could speak one-on-one with, so he really helped us in the council while I was there. I cannot say for when I wasn't there, I'm only speaking when I was there. So he told me, go speak to the Opal rep and tell him what is happening. I tell him that should not be. If assistance is given to farmers, no matter what community you come from or who you support, you are a farmer, you qualify as a farmer, you should get assistance. And this is why we had to come overseas, because when the opportunity presented itself for green card, he said, well, Petra, we have to get out of here because they're not going to help me. And I had a great loss, and I cannot start back the farm now on my own. So we had to leave Dominica and go overseas to get refuge and to pay our bills, because I was the only one working at the time. And with everything that was happening, one salary doesn't cut it in Dominica. So we had to leave everything behind and go to the overseas. So when I tell people, I understand why the young people are not involved and don't want to take part in what is happening in Dominica, is because I know firsthand why. Because I tell myself, I say, you know what? I'm not going in public service again. I'm not going to help people because the country not helping me back. And I was not asking for money to put in my pocket. I was only asking for what they said they was going to give farmers, and my husband was a farmer. And I expect my husband to have gotten part of it. And I know a lot of people will come and say, oh, when somebody meet me personally and they say, oh, your husband doesn't vote Labour, but he wants Labour money. I had to tell them, let me tell you, the monies for this program are not Labour monies. They are Dominica monies. And my husband is a Dominican. So is every other United Workers Party or Team Unity Party or APP or Freedom, they are Dominicans. And if there's a program for a certain group of people, everybody across the board should benefit from it. And this is one of the things they keep putting in our young people's head. That's why our young people are afraid. They speak, they're afraid of speaking up because they're afraid that they will lose the little things that they get in, like the NEP, they get in monies, the little help they get in the cutting the grass. Can you imagine some young person from my village came up from high school and the only thing you could give them is so that they could go and cut grass? Not that I say cutting grass is a problem. I'm just saying there's no real development to the person, because human resources is the best resources to develop in any country. If you develop your human resources, you have it going. But when you send your human resources to cut grass after they come out 5 years of high school, I mean, come on, do the maths.
Yeah.
Like a favorite slang these days. Who does that?
Who does that?
Who does that? Yeah.
You know who does that?
Wow,
So
wow,
we have to bring back these things. We have to bring back these things to let them know they matter. They matter. One of the things I used to tell my young people is that look at Dominica as a business. My major is in accounting and I love economics. And I know in economy that your resources, your human resources and natural resources of your country are the best resources that you can develop for sustainability, not for now, but for future time. And when I watch our country, I see the Dominican Labour Party killed famine, dead. And I'm saying it, and I'm not saying it for me to say I'm sorry. I'm saying it because it's true. They kill famine, which is what we should be developing. We are land of water, 365 rivers. We have waterfalls, we have lakes, we have all these things. But if the tourists don't come in to watch them, then vendors cannot make money in Roseau. We still rely on somebody else's will. I can book my cruise and say I'm not coming to Dominica. I don't have to come to Dominica. But the thing about it, people must eat. And the world out there, everybody eating. And agriculture is one of our main resources in Dominica, and that is what we should be pushing our young people to go into, because the land is there, just sitting there. Can you imagine when I was growing up, the farmer had the biggest house around? I know of a farmer who bought a vehicle for $130,000 cash, and he was a farmer. He didn't even attend high school. He bought it cash. In the 1980s, 1990s, he bought his vehicle cash, a Toyota cash, for him to go to his farm, because the income was there, the monies was being made. And then you take that farmer and you reduce him to nothing when he have to come to bed. Come on, think about it, people. I can tell you right there.
Wow. Petra, I'm listening to you there. I'm listening to you there, and trust me, I'm spellbound by basically what you're saying, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Your cousin, what is his name, Phil Carbon, is saying hi to you, Petra.
Hi, Phil.
He said hi, cuz.
Yes.
Let me just, before I move back to you, Paul, Claude Sanfi is saying here, Paul, you're on point, always well spoken. Grace. Claudius. Claudius, that is it. Okay, Claudius, good evening to you, my brother. Grace Law is saying here, with such mentalities, how can Dominica move forward? An all-important question that Grace is asking here. She said, sad to say, but I give up on Dominica. And that is why we're having the conversation today, Paul and Petra.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Persons like that, we don't want them to leave Dominica. We want Dominica to be much more hopeful, a country that persons wouldn't, opt out, as it were. Yes.
Interestingly, my wife and I was having that conversation today, as we normally do, always pondering on ideas about how to move this country forward. And one of the things that we identify is the whole question of capital flight. Now, before I get to that, I just want to chime in on what Petra had said with respect to her uncle. And when you said that, Petra, it really brought smiles to my face. And Alan Carbon and the slate of leaders that existed then was, in fact, what a leader best constitute. And I say that without no reservation.
True.
My father and I would always speak about the leaders then who were only focused on giving service to their people, because politics is service to a country rather than seeking personal gains. It's unfortunate that now there's a whole degree of sort of enriching leaders enriches themselves on public on the resources of the public, and not just the leaders, but also the political class, people who are with close proximity to those leaders and their likes. And young people are always looking at that, and in that case, it doesn't serve as sort of a pull factor, because what it says is that the only opportunity for you to maintain any or to gain any level of growth or development is if you sing on the same hymn sheet like the leaders of the day, or to support a particular, in that case, the Dominican Labour Party, because we are speaking only of the Dominican Labour Party since they have existed for the last 20 years. In fact, I don't think the Labour Party can blame any political party to date, as it regards to anything wrong that is happening. It is their responsibility thereof, and their responsibility solely to bear. But leaders of Peter Carbon Alan Carbon understood that it was necessary to build communities. And not just to build communities, but build communities that were equitable and that was fair and that where everyone benefits rather than a selected few. The whole question of capital flight and young people, and by capital flight, I mean what transpires in the country is that we see young persons really seeing no way or room rather to accommodate their ideas or their visions or the aspirations that they have. And a lot of frustration is creeping in. And I hear it every day. I swear that I have set a goal to become the Prime Minister of Dominica, and the good Lord puts me each and every day on a path to hear the stories of Dominicans, many Dominicans, old and young, who are outrightly fed up and frustrated and see no future for themselves and their families in the Commonwealth of Dominica. And it is rather unfortunate. It's really sad. When you hear the stories of a young person starting a business and not receiving monies, in most cases, the public support that is given to small business is heavily, channel along only party supporters, and then the reasons they don't get the help. You hear the stories that people getting money, but they buying bike, they going on vacation, they buying jewelry and clothes, and those monies not reaching in the hands of the the entrepreneur who has a viable business option and a viable business solution to offer to the general public. And because of that, what we're doing is that we are literally forcing or pushing our young people to leave the country. And by that, when I say capital flight, you live with the human resource, and I don't see sort of proposed solution to retain or to help young people to remain within the country and to develop in such a way that they are able to benefit themselves and their families. And I've noted that there was some pronouncements that was made with respect to incubator, some business incubator that is intended to help small businesses. But when I hear these things, Loftus and Petra, it reminds me always that I was in the same chair as every other as all the DLP ministers and cabinet ministers and the likes. You understand? I was in the same chair listening to the information then that was proposed 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and yet has yet to be achieved. So what I mean to say is that when Dominicans hear about these things, they're nothing but flattery, man. They're very flattery. There's a lot of words that are spoken eloquently to sort of almost hypnotize the population and into the belief that something is going to happen when we know without the resources, especially and in the global economic climate that we're in, is unachievable and not feasible. You're with me, Loftus?
Yes,
So,
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
Because
Yes.
the plans that are being put forward will always remain plans if they are not turned into actionable ideas. And we are listening to those information. A young man in a remote community in Dominica is listening to the media and wanting to be inspired and wanting to know what lies in the national development plan for him or for her. You understand? And if we kind of draw resources and allow it to trickle down into communities and to touch the lives of the individuals that matters the most, then obviously we are on a wrong development path. And that is where we find ourselves in Dominica. And I swear, sooner rather than later, we may experience droves of young people leaving our shores, almost an exodus. And what does that mean? It means that there will be an even greater pressure on the working population in Dominica of who has to support the tax base. And there are not many people working in the country. And we're seeing with the rise of inflation that salaries are not increasing proportionate to the rise in taxes and the rise in the cost and standard of in the rise of cost of living. We may have heard about the experience of wanting to reduce certain taxes and to make it less expensive for business owners and for the wider Dominican public. But when you peer into the national budget and you look at those taxes, they only support the upper class. You understand? And we have to understand that the fight in Dominica is always going to be between rich and poor, Afro-Dominican, Kalinago, and if we take away the struggles that we have experienced as a race, as a people, then we will not see and understand the fight.
True.
For example, if we see the idea that persons who have more than 100 units will not receive VAT on their lights. What does that mean? A vast majority of working class people in Dominica don't spend 100 units on their electricity bills. So the policies that are being made and the policies that are being implemented does not pass the majority of the population. And I'm talking about the Maliwe, I'm talking about the poor Dominican, I'm talking about the woman who has to feed her children on a pound of backaneck. Mm-hmm. You understand? I'm talking about a young man who has just got off from high school, just left the Dominica State College and have no job. We just graduated 400 young people. And I did some statistics based on research and my own involvement in the public sphere. And not a lot of these young people will be employed. Where are these 400 young people going? So what you see is a sort of like a reactionary approach to development. It's only after you have graduated 400 young people, then you will find ways sort of employ them in the public or private sector. You understand? So this whole development agenda by the ruling party is not positioning young people to any great degree so that you can set them up for success. And on top of that, we're not training them and we're not mentoring them to the extent that you would allow them to even weather the storm. Hence the reason why you see an increase in so much illicit activities going on in Dominica, an increase in mental health issues, an increase in child sexual abuse. That is a social fabric that is no longer able to sustain or to support social ills, because in every society there are social ills. But when you remove the structures in place that can support these and mitigate them, then they get out of control. So
Yeah, true. Well said.
if you're telling me that young people are extremely comfortable in where they are in the country, the answer to that is no. All that I have said. The fact is, the future does not look bright for Dominican young people, and that is the blatant truth. There's no need to sugarcoat it, because we know they are aching, they are paining, they're frustrated, and they're finding frustration these days. Hence the reason why you will find that Dominicans, even the leaders themselves are using the frustration of young people to their advantage. For example, if you notice Loftus and Petra, Dominica is on a serious rave. Everything Dominica concerns itself now, or where young people are concerned, is a huge fete and a huge party, an opportunity to just get together, smoke, drink, and get high. What happens after that?
What happens? We'll get to that and more. Okay. Let me just move across now, Paul. Thank you very much.
Sure, no
Always
problem.
Very inspiring to listen to. Petra, someone is asking on the live feed. June Bernard James is asking a question here, all important question. Why do you think, Petra, that civics, the topic itself, it's not part of our school curriculum? Just why?
Because you see, information is powerful. The right knowledge is very powerful. And if you want to cripple any community, it's not give them the right knowledge. Amen. And we don't teach our children the civic duties because we don't want them to exercise their civil rights.
True.
So if I don't know what is my rights, there's nothing to exercise. Mm-hmm. So this is why it happens. This is just why it happens. And you can look back to all the great leaders. We love to speak about Martin Luther King Jr. We love to speak about Nelson Mandela. We love to speak about Bob Marley, all these people. But when you go back to them, all what they were fighting for is for the civil rights of their community. Precisely. For people to be treated equally. So we love to use their quotes. We love to use what they we love to use them as example, but nobody's willing to step up to the plate of what they say and what they speak about to make it right. Like, for example, if I never tell I have my children, if I never tell them the difference between making somebody touch them and making somebody not touch them, as you rightly say, we are speaking about the all the things about the children that coming up in Dominica, different people molesting children. If I never teach my children, if somebody touch you in this place or in this place, let me know, because that is wrong. They will go out in the public, somebody will do it and they'll be unaware. To them, it will be okay because that's the norm, nobody speak about it. So you see, if you inform the youth of their rights, then the youth can use that to come back to challenge you. And apparently some people don't like challenges. Even when you know better because they didn't teach you, but you research, they try to shut you down and make you look like it's you that crazy. And they look for something in your past to make you look like your point is not valid based on some mistake you make in the past, which is crazy, but this is what is happening. So one thing I always encourage my young people, I told them, Dominica is like a corporate company. The Prime Minister is the CEO, which we, the shareholders, have elected. And every 5 years, we come back to the drawing board and we put the CEO and we say, this is what we expected the CEO to do. Did he do his job? Did he follow the rules? Did he make progress? Did he put a plan in place that will expand the company? And then we, as the shareholders, should make a determination whether we want to keep him as CEO or not, just like the corporate business. If you're not performing, then we take you out.
Precisely.
But yes, but that's not what happening. They don't teach it to people like that. They let you be scared of even thinking. But except me, because I am my own person. As I tell them, I cannot be victimized. You can take away things from me, you think, but I will not be victimized. And I stand today only for the young people, just to bridge the gap and to educate them, just to educate them and let them know they are shareholders in Dominica. And every shareholder have a vote. So your vote matters. To sit down and say you're not voting just because, no. You want change, you have to be the one to make change. Change is not going to happen for you. You have to make change. You have to come up. You have to take that stand. You have to say enough is enough. It's okay to dream about it at night. When you wake up, the same situation is there. If you want to see real change, you have to step up. If I want to see real change, I have to go to do it myself. I hear some people say, oh, I live in it for God. I tell them, well, apparently you're not reading the same Bible I read in. Because God say he gave man dominion to dominate the earth. God not coming to dominate nothing on earth for us. He give us the power. He said, you go out and do that. You take care of the animals. You take care of this. I'm not coming out from heaven to come down to do it for you. I put you there. Same thing happens to our young people. Nobody in England going to come down and do it for you, you know.
You're making a very critical point there, Petra, in that, you know, some persons and myself, we normally have that big debate sometimes as to what we live for God and what we do for ourselves.
Exactly. We think that I hear people say, oh, God, we believe it for God. God will make change. God not coming to make change in the government. You have to make the change. You have to say, if you feel that the people who represent you are morally correct, they're doing the right thing, and you have to decide. And like I tell somebody, some people want to attack me as well, you know, and they like, because I always outspoken. They're like, oh, Petra, you just run your mouth too much. You just, I say, no, when something is wrong, I love you, but I will not condone your wrongdoing. But I love you. Yeah. But what I tell it to you, yeah.
There's a serious price that we pay, Petra, for our level of our commitment or love for country. Yeah.
Yeah,
but in most cases, we find that we're justified only because what you have now said, God gave dominion over this earth. And if we see anything wrong, that we have to step up and act on it. Yeah.
You don't sit down and say, go church every Sunday and say, I praying for God to make change. God is not, God say he need a vessel to make change. True. You are that vessel. Everybody in Dominica is the vessel to make change. Indeed. Your will is what making the change in Dominica. You can pray from, I hear people say, oh, let us make a prayer meeting. I say, what is the point of making all those prayer meetings? And when to act, you do nothing. You're wasting my time.
True.
Exactly.
Because when I go to act, you're the same one who pulled me down.
And on that note, Petra, on that note, David Joseph is writing here, kind of subscribing to exactly the point that you're making, but asking an all-important question nonetheless. He's saying here, the question remains, what are our young people willing to do to bring about change and, in essence, a better future? He continues by writing, you cannot refrain from participating in the electoral process and yet complain about the lack of proper governance.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sorry, Loftus. Go ahead, Petra.
I say exactly. You cannot sit on the sidelines and expect change to happen. You have to be part of that change. And if you're not willing to fight for change, then just, sorry to say that, but just keep your mouth shut. Yeah. And just take it as like a man, like they say, take it like a man. Because everybody that bring us where we are today, deliver us from slavery, they paid a price. Some of them went to prison. Some of them, their children was killed. Some of them, they lost their eye. Some of them, they lost their leg. But today we are where we are today because people fought for that freedom. And for us to tell our youth that they just have to sit down and do nothing, this is just crazy. No, we, the young people, we have the strength. There is strength in unity. And when you see we build that strength together, if you take two ropes and you make put them together and you take a knife and you try to cut and the next person have one rope and somebody have a knife, the one that have the two ropes tied together, it's going to take a longer time to cut through. than the one with the single rope, because unity, strength in unity. And we have to tell our young people that you have the power. You have the power. You can wake up tomorrow, they call election, you wake up tomorrow, you're dissatisfied with whoever that representing you, step up. Even if you don't like the person they're sending against the one that day, even if you don't like them. But the only way you're going to let them know you're dissatisfied is by taking them out. That way they will see, look, what? Last year I was 80% in that, and this year I'm 30. You have to pull up your socks.
True.
You have to pull up your socks.
I agree.
True. And on that note, Paul, just before you come in, and on that note, because Paula is on a high now, Petra is on a high now. And I just want to use that high opportunity she's at now to tell the listeners and viewers that it was Petra's idea when she called or she messaged me last week. And she said, Lofty, you know something? We have to do something for and on behalf of the young people. What can we do? And so on that note, it is still in the embryo phase, as it were. But hearing Petra tonight, I know that will soon hit off the ground, whereby every Saturday I produce a live from my end, a live engagement on Facebook every Saturday from 6 o'clock. Now, Petra has decided to join me in that live session, and she and others like you, Paul, and other young persons, other potential young leaders will be joining me, whereby we will pay special attention to our young people. That is a way we are trying to reach out to the young people to get them out of that sleep, that slumber, that political drunken state that they're in, some of them, whereby the discussion we're having here tonight, we may have it in the future, but we'll not be going through some of the gravity as it pertains to the situation that the young persons find themselves. So yes, from next week, Saturday, if the good Lord above is willing, Petra will be with me on my live, and we'll be going through a segment, especially catering for young persons in particular. I just wanted to break that news there, Paul. Go right ahead.
That's great news indeed, Loftus.
Yes.
That's great news indeed, because, you know, I want to give some credit to young Dominicans, because I noted recently you said, well, just now, that we're not here to give young people brickbat, except we're raising issues of universal concern, which is directed to young people. And I want every young Dominican who is listening to my voice, and if you become aware of this recording at some point, that you should understand, it is because that we have a deep concern for your well-being. It is that we know, because we have been involved in national development, whether actively or inactively or directly or indirectly, it's because we understand that the direction that Dominica is taking does not involve your development, that we continually put ourselves forward. I always said, I used to say it a lot to my assistant at NYC. I used to say, I consider myself to be the sacrificial lamb. It's on the basis that we recognize that the direction that the leaders of the day are taking, and when I say leaders, I don't limit it to politicians alone. Exactly. Because the church and the state has been responsible for centuries to govern the affairs of man. The state looks at the resources of man, and the church is supposed to look at the psychology and the social development of the human race. And together, they have done great havoc, as much as also they have done good when good was warranted. And in the Dominica context, we find the nature or the direction that the country is taking is leaving the most important strata or the most important segment of the society, which is the young people, as Petra rightly identified. We are almost a borderline in 40% young people. If we cannot use, or rather, if we cannot involve young people in our development first, then as a country, we are going to have serious repercussions down the line. And I'm someone who normally plans for 10 years. And I can tell you
if we continue on the path that we are now, the next 10 years is probably going to be the most daunting 10 years that we'll ever have in this country. We are at a critical point in our history. In the political process, which involves young people, we have to make the decision whether we are going to continue with the regime or whether we're going to usher in new ideas, new vision, and new energy. I personally, having been involved with the DLP for such a long time, must say that the DLP, as I have seen and rightly said, is bankrupt for ideas. Leaders and power and politics all have what you call a timeline. What we are seeing now is that because they have been consistently involved in the political process, have become extremely complacent. Hence the reason why we see this ushering of a new change engine happening in other Caribbean islands, where fellas say, well, you know what, bossman, you've been here for so long, I cannot tell anymore if you have our best interests at heart. And that is the question that young people have to ask the leaders of the day. Do you have my best interests of heart? Hey, I'm a young man, I'm a young woman. I want to get a job after I finish school. I want the ability to buy a car. I also want the ability to buy a piece of land and build a house. I also, in the same vein, want to save up for my retirement because at some point I will grow old and be unable to fend for myself. If I have given the opportunity to work, I also want to reinvest my monies into the economy by way of a private venture, or I want to also invest and contribute to charitable reasons. These are the questions that our leaders should be asking or have on their mind as it relates to any young person. If you multiply one individual with that burst of ideas along several others, you will find great power, the ability to contribute economically to the development of the country, the ability to contribute socially to the development and welfare of our country. And I can tell you safely, I have been in the inner working halls and the factory rooms and the war rooms of the Dominica Labour Party, and that is not conversations you hear. Suddenly you are hearing this whole question about wealth generation. The question of wealth and the priority of wealth generation should have been on the front burner.
Yeah.
The whole question of agriculture as economic state and thrust should have been on the front burner when we took office in 2000. Because as you can well imagine, the vision of our dear leader, Rosie Douglas, was dispelled and thrown out in a bucket of water in a window. And as a result of that, we are running someone's lunatic and reckless vision to sort of self-aggrandize and become some form of what we read in our sociology and economic textbook as a dictator.
Let me just add to the
Paul and Petra, the double P's, the tag team right here. Can we have a second leg to that next week?
Of course.
Discussion, because trust me,
I am at your service.
The time is already at hand, close at hand, and we have not really touched on certain things. Paul just before you come in, Petra, Paul mentioned something a while ago when he was talking about some of the young persons that are of age now that may not have seen or known other governments at work. Paul, I am a thinker and I look at things very critically. The discussion we're having tonight, let me share some of the blame, if I would use that word, to some of our more elderly folks among us who, by their actions or sometimes their inactions, have Dominique where it's at today. I'm saying, for example, someone who was, let's say, 30, 35 years, adult, when this Labour Party took over, They been 30, 35 years then. They would have known other governments that did what they did for Dominica in terms of development. These people, Paul, Petra, the listeners, they are now 50, 55, 60 and older. And do you know, Paul, when I'm on the ground talking to some of these elderly people today, having seen other governments work in Dominica, these are the more hard not head people to crack.
Yeah, you're right about that.
I agree.
They are some of
You're very right
the
about
hardest people to crack politically and tell
And
them,
that is
hey,
where our challenge is.
here it is. Here it is. You are now in the quote unquote senior citizen bracket. Why do you, after having seen all what you saw already politically speaking in Dominica, you still continue to support something that is not only holding you down, but holding these young people down, holding the 18s, the 20s, the 25, the 30s down by you putting an X or a cross, whatever you want to call it, every 4.5, 5-year cycle by a government or set of people that you know that is not working in not just your interest, but in these young people's interest. And these are the same set of people, some of them, that turn around and say the young people do this and the young people do that. And I just wanted to put that there, Paul, on the table in that
you made a very good point.
Some of these people, they are part and parcel of the problem in an active manner where the discussion we're having is concerned. I just wanted to
you've made a very good point there, Loftus. Indeed. Sorry, Petra.
Yes, go ahead, Petra.
I will answer that for you. That question. You see, the thing about it is that the people that were 35 and 40, they did not work to the best of their ability and their potential during their youth years. They had nothing to look on. Yes, they cannot sustain themselves going to their elderly years. So now that they are 55 and 60 and they are in the promises of the little $300 and the little gas tank to be, they feel to themselves that because they did not work and have nothing laid down here, that it will be sufficient for them just to take them through. So then they plead with their children. They tell them, don't go and do for them, how are I going to get the little $300? And I hear people say that. I'm not telling you something somebody tell me on the road. I hear people say that of it. And I'm like, are you crazy? What is $300 going to do for you? Your light bill is already to something. What is 300 going to do for you? And that is the concept that people have. You see, they did not work for themselves. So they're not seeing it as a problem for the young people. And that is where the young people should come in to educate them and let them know, if I am self-employed mom, and if I can work for myself, $300, you'll get more than that. I can give you 3,000. But we afraid to disappoint our mommy. We afraid to, make them feel bad because they have that thing that, me that take care of you. Me that raise you. You didn't even have father. Me alone that go through my struggles to bring you up. And now you want to make me lose my opportunity? Can you imagine a mother telling that to a young child, putting a young child's future at risk just so that she can benefit and become a I don't want to say the word beggar because I think it's too strong, but to
dependent.
Dependent
on somebody else. This is just crazy.
Yeah. If I might just add to that, Loftus, and that's a very good point you've raised. You see, what has happened is that our older peers now, through their actions, are robbing us of a future. You understand? A future which involves our productive ability to fend for ourselves, to make monies, have a family, buy land, buy a vehicle, and to live a Dominican dream, if you want to consider it. You see, Dominica has taken a very dangerous road, which really started with socialism. And Petra and I would know that. Dominica took a very dangerous road by its leaders very deliberately taking Dominica along the path of socialism, which is an increased welfare state. So in this increased welfare state, everything is expected to be given freely and for
lack of a better word, equitably. But what it is doing now, it is robbing us of an economic base. Now, the private sector is not very inclined to want to even begin to sort of ruffle anybody's feathers, because even in a socialist state, Dominica being a retail economy, and I want to make that very clear, Dominica is a retail economy. It only involves the buying and selling of goods. We're not producing anything. We're not manufacturing anything. So the private sector is not at any loss at any given point in time. What it means there is this increased welfare state means that the entire population will be given handouts, and they will be given things in exchange for their support, in exchange for their loyalty. But what it is doing now is robbing every young Dominican of a future which involves them leveraging their skills and talents to the advantage of their future well-being. And as you would also expect, socialism will then usher a new way for communism. And with the heightened state of socialism Dominica is in now, and we know the whole question about this whole anti-terrorism act where you can't say no much, you cannot march and you cannot protest peacefully, or you can't raise a placard. I mean, I was in Roseau just recently, and I was attempting to go to the headquarters and could not enter the government yard, which I often love to stroll through, just to get some good energy. And it gets so locked. So I was like, what boy, rain falling, what is gonna happen? I'm gonna get wet. I had to make the entire run, not realizing that the entire area was barricaded and locked because Afi Martin and his followers were having a peace walk.
Yeah.
You understand me?
Yeah.
So the climate in the country is on the basis that socialism will give way to communism. The fact our rights and our freedoms are being suppressed means that as a population, we cannot speak up and we cannot advocate for the things that are necessary for overall well-being. So, Loftus, I personally believe that the only solution before us now is an entire change, a complete overhaul, and to usher in a new way for fresh ideas. Yeah, and to bring forward new opportunities.
And so maybe that discussion will be the angle we'll be taking it for the next engagement as to what can young people do? What is the solution for young people in particular moving forward in this country?
Indeed. Yeah. I do believe we welcome every opportunity that we can get to continue to speak. If you would have listened carefully to the Arab Spring that occurred in, I'm not sure if it's 2011 or therefore, where 11, the entire
11, yeah,
where the entire Arab region, the young people rose up and toppled every single government that stood in their way. For example, in Bangladesh, as we know, and we're hearing of Pakistan now. The fact is, whether you want to accept it,
Sri Lanka lately.
Sri Lanka, whether we want to accept it or not, in Dominica, the good Lord always sees it fit to usher in a new way and a new form of justice and peace and righteousness and prosperity for his people. And I always tend to say what is more necessary is the whole question of laws of physics, which governs the world. What goes up must come down. And if you're very careful to recognize the political parties themselves have their time span, they have their timeline.
True. Paul, I have to cut you short there in the interest of time.
Sure.
We have like 7 more minutes that we have to wrap up. I still have to take some comments on the live. And I still have to ask that all-important question, which we haven't touched on as yet. Paul, Petra to you. Petra, in your opinion, what moves young people? What are young people moved by in Dominica? What? Just what?
Okay, some of the things the young people can do is, I don't believe in destroying property, and I don't believe in destroying the peace. I believe if you're going to get solution, you have to do it in a manner that does not destroy anything else somebody worked hard for. So what we can do as young people in Dominica, go to your PALREP office. If you're not satisfied with them, they are there every Thursday, I think, if they're still doing it.
I don't think so.
Every Thursday. Well, in my days, you could go and speak to your parent one-on-one on Thursday. In my days, and he was always available. So you go, you make a time with him, and you set a community meeting, and you demand his presence. And there at these community meetings, you get the questions and the problems or what the challenges that people are facing, and one person would get all that, and then we present it to the representative. And you go, each village should do it one by one. That's where he does not be overwhelmed with information. And you give him some time to come back to you with solutions. And then you let him know at the end of the process, if this solution cannot be met, then this is our outcome. This is what we have to do. Then we have to look for new representative. You cannot give us what we want. We need somebody that can give us what we want.
But the question that I ask you, thanks for offering some solutions. What in your mind, Petra, presently now in today's Dominica, what in your mind moves Dominica young people? What? Just what?
What that move them? Let's see, to tell you the honest truth.
How can you get the attention in Dominica?
The only way you can get Dominica, the young people attention, I'm telling you, is making, I hate to say it, but it's true. You have to make that CO for them and let them know it's a CO moment. And when it is through the CO moment, bring up that conversation. Stop
bring
it
the message, yeah.
And bring the message in. But make sure you advertise it as CO. Because I'm telling you, I hate to say it, but it's true. If you do it any other way, they won't attend. Most people won't attend.
That is exactly the point Paul, I was making.
Yeah, Paul, we have like 2 minutes for you. 2 minutes.
That's the point I was making. Sadly, it has come to that. But the leaders have been using this to their advantage. That everything that involves young people should be some level of entertainment. But I do believe that we have to move towards educating and informing our young persons to take action for their own developments. But more importantly, to be consciously aware of what is happening in their country, and also to take their leaders and hold them accountable for the things that they say and the things that they promise and their stated plans and intentions that they have for young Dominicans.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, final wrapping up here, guys. Petra, take the first knock.
Okay, I just want to reach out to the young people today. I want to tell you it was a pleasure being here and trying to do something that involved all of us for the better good of our future, not only for today, but for our future. I do hope that you as you listen to us, that you will go back and meditate on what we say and be truthful to yourself, be honest with yourself. Because once you come honest with yourself, you begin to see the reality of what's happening right there in our eyes in Dominica. So that is what I have to leave with you today. Go back, listen to the recording, and see if what we're saying makes sense to you. And if it does, take action.
All right, take action. Lovely note to end on. Petra, thank you very, very much for your presence here this afternoon. Hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Brother Baron, your final comments, sir.
Loftus, thank you again for the opportunity. Petra, it was a pleasure to share this platform with you this evening. I do believe that we gave justice to the topic. Of course, as you'd imagine, these topics have to be discussed over a longer period of time because it involves a lot of information sharing. My call to Dominican young persons are continuously to recognize your own self-worth. You are increasingly aware of how the world is progressing, and of course the opportunities that are available in the world that you cannot find in Dominica. I know you want to make Dominica your home, but you also have to recognize that you have a responsibility to give direction to the leadership of the country. And Dominica is nothing different from any other state. Currently, we're first facing a management crisis. It's on the basis that our resources and your talents as young people have not been leveraged for the better interests of Dominica. And because of that, we find ourselves with a lot of economic and a lot of social problems. So I would leave the ball in your court, as every young Dominican needs to know that your right to vote and your decision to support and align yourself with a political movement will mean or will spell a better future for you. Thank you very much.
All right, Brother Baron, thank you very much. Petra, again, thank you very much for making your presence felt here this afternoon in a very meaningful way. See you guys next week.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you.
Lord, yeah. I'm Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Oh, Lord. I'm Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown, wanna hold I down. Yeah, no. I'm Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown, you're too wicked. Hey, hey, hey. I'm Mrs. Brown, you can't hold I down. Lord, under attack from friend and foe. From Mrs. Brown and Co. Under attack, Lord, firing from her roadside track. Mama, under attack from Heckle and Jekyll. Them have a bigger time plot. Under attack,
Dominicans, are we under attack in Dominica?
Lord. I wanna make two.
Are the young people in Dominica under attack?
I couldn't take the deal that they were giving, so I walked right out their door. Now Mrs. Brown, them a frown. I call that goose is gone.
Dominica, you just listened to the first leg of the Civic Vibes program for this afternoon.
The score.
So all those of you tuned in and still continue to be here with us, thank you very much.
Lord.
Sorry I could not get to some of your questions, your comments,
Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Oh Lord.
but I will try to do that sometime next week when we re-engage with our people, huh?
Now hold I down.
Yes, Brother Paul, Sister Petra,
I'm Mrs. Brown, you
very dynamic duo indeed.
head
Speaking for and on behalf of our young people in Dominica.
down. Lord, under attack.
Coming up next, the second leg, no stranger, Brother Alvin Thomas is here
Your time plot. Under attack. Lord, firing
as he and Civic Vibes continue to put under that microscope, that is,
from friend and foe. From Mrs. Brown,
the report from the CCJ,
Lord.
3 hour electoral matters in Dominica.
Lord.
A very important report indeed.
Tell you them too wicked. So, yeah. Look, Mrs. Brown, them applaud.
Let me move across to say a special good afternoon now to my brother and friend, Mr. Alvin Thomas. Good evening to you, sir. How are you?
Hey, Lofty, I'm doing great, man. Can't complain. Super.
Well, I can see in your background, you're on top of the world, huh?
Oh, yeah,
So
oh,
that's
yeah. It's been a wonderful day, wonderful week, and heading into another very successful and wonderful week. So I can't complain. Last Sunday, I had a birthday. Feels good. As you can see, I just turned 15. So I'm trying to maintain that 15 look. You know what I mean?
That's good.
But
That's good.
I'm good, man. And I can say and I can see you're doing pretty well too.
I'm holding the string. I'm
trying to follow you. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Walk in your footsteps.
But Alvin, thank you again for being here, brother. We are here. I know that you are always ready to go. A scout, that is, always ready to go. So this afternoon will be no different indeed. Let us get the discussion kicking off.
All right. Before I get into our segment, which is the electoral reform, I must say that I listened to the program you just had with the two young persons, Paul Barron and Petra George, I think her name is.
Petra Carbon
George, yes.
Yes.
And listen, man, Lofty, like you, and I've said this repeatedly, I have hope in young people. I really, really and truly have hope in young people. I mean, these two young persons were quite eloquent in their comments and the observation and the analysis that they made as it relates to where we are as a country and where our young people fits into that whole scheme of things. And I think there is hope. I think there are a lot more Paul Barons and Petros out there. Granted, some of them are not as forthcoming as they should, but I think there is hope. I always like to reference, and I think Petra made it quite clear too, that we ourselves like to reference the Martin Luther King, the Nelson Mandela, and all those folks. And history is good. History points us into where we should be going, both for our own history as a people in Dominica, by extension, the Caribbean, and the rest of the world. And I'm reading this book called, the title is Rules for Radicals. Quite an interesting title. Rules for Radical, a pragmatic premier for realistic radical. It's by an author called Saul Alinsky. And he made an observation in there as it relates to young people. And I just wanted to quote that. He said, as it relates to young people, they must feel so frustrated, so defeated, so lost, so futureless in the prevailing system that they are willing to let go of the past and chance the future. So it's kind of saying, well, hey, they must feel that pressure, which I know they're feeling. And at some point, that pressure is going to break in. I think Petra is the one who said to that, we must meet them on their turf. And I agree with that. This author also made the point that in order to change the future, you must start where you are. So we have to start where we are, even before we begin to look at whatever the future should look like. Let's begin where we are. And that is clearly what I interpret from what she said, meeting the young people on their own turf. But I think there is hope. She did say that basically that prayer without action is useless, and we know that. And action comes from keeping the heat on. We got to keep the heat on. That's where the action comes from. So I just want to commend them and say hats off to them. Let me just also make another quick observation as it relates to youth development in Dominica. A lot of us, many of us may have heard the budget address a week or two ago, a little over a week now. And let me bring something to your attention and that of your listeners with us today. In the national budget for 22-23, an amount of $18.2 million was budgeted for what is called recurrent expenditure for the division of the Ministry of Youth. I think it is called Youth. Let's see what I'll tell you the exact title it's called. Yeah, it's called Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Senior Security, and Dominicans with Disability. That's a particular line item, the department. So for 22-23, this current budget, $18.2 million was budgeted. That represents 2.8% of the recurrent expenditure. That's where the ministry or the department was saying, this is the amount of money we need to run the operation as it relates to the areas that I identified. Last year's budget, which was the 21-22 budget, for that same line item, for that same ministry, an amount of $19.4 million was budgeted, which is 3.0% of the total recurrent expenditure. What happened in this budget? That amount was reduced by $1.2 million. So basically they're saying that this current financial year, we do not need as much money to operate that particular ministry. And as such, we're going to reduce it from last budget 21-22 to 2023 by $1.2 million. Here's another area. Sports, culture, and community development. Again, another area that affects youth or would have something to do with youth developments. This current budget, 22-23, under the recurrent expenditure, again, I'm saying recurrent expenditure. This is the line item that takes care of recurrent expenditure for that particular ministry. It has nothing to do with capital expenditure, which is something different. So to run the ministry, to hire more people to take charge and to do the programs, supplies, you name it. 12.4 million was budgeted this year, which represents 1.9% of the total recurrent expenditure. Last budget, in the budget 2021-2022, a total of 13.5 million was budgeted, which represented 2.1% of the total recurrent expenditure. So this budget is reduced by $1.1 million. $1.1 million. So between those two ministries, the reduction in the recurrent expenditure was $3.1 million. But here an interesting area. Let me give you the icing on the cake. The line item that represents national security and home affairs. You hear the line item? National security and home affairs. Mm-hmm. Again, recurrent expenditure. That is the item that represents national security issues, paying your national security, your police officers, buying your supplies, materials. I would imagine stuff like your guns will come from there, your bullets will come there, your tear gas. All of this expenditure from the ministry, recurrent, national security. It has nothing to do with capital expenditure. It's not nothing to do with building a police station or getting a boat that's going to go on the waters and surveillance for drugs. Recurrent expenditure. Last budget for 21-22, a total of 54.7 million was budgeted for national security, which represented 8.4% of the recurrent budget. This current budget for 22-23, a total of 61.1 million was budgeted, which represented 9.4% of the recurrent expenditure, an increase of $6.4 million. So the government is saying we need $6.4 million more to spend as recurrent expenditure for national security. But they have reduced a number of areas, including youth, including youth affairs, environmental rural modernization, that's another decrease, sports, another decrease, planning, economic development, climate resilience, sustainable development, and renewable energy decreased by 1.7 million. They have decreased all these areas, but they have increased national security by $6.4 million. Draw your own conclusion. I will not conclude it. I just thought it is worth to share that.
True, and
it shows where our priorities are.
Yeah.
And you may have heard too, though, you may have heard, Lofty, that you now can get duty-free to bring in your pleasure crafts and your pleasure boat. So I know you've always wanted to bring one in, so you won't be able to pay duties on that. It's completely duty-free. I now may have to pay the duty on the little truck I want to bring in to do my legal agriculture. Or if I want to build my little house, I have to pay duty on all the materials. If I want to open a little shad MOA, I have to pay all the duty on all the supplies that come in, the bottles to bottle the shampoo, the wraps to wrap the stuff. I have to pay my duty on that. That's okay. But you bring in your pleasure rafts and your pleasure boats, duty free. So let me know when you get it in Dominica. I can come get a little ride with you.
Like you, Alvin. I will see nothing on that. Like you. But, I'll use your phrase.
But you know, it's important to note those things, Lofty, because now we can then talk as I'm sure we want to go into the electoral reform. Election have consequences.
True.
Because like Petra said, think of it as a corporation. You have the prime minister as the CEO, you have the government as a board of directors, the shareholders appoint you and say, well, give me your report card. And this is the report card we're getting. We're getting a report card where there's a reduction in the number of areas that's critical, and you have increases in areas that to our minds is not as critical. And we have the issue of electoral reform, which is and should be an important matter. And let me just say though that as the sun will shine, whether it is on a gloomy day or on a bright day, so will the topic of electoral reform shine. Whether it's on a bright day or on a gloomy day, it will shine.
True.
And while some may feel, well, why you keep belaboring the point? I just heard recently the new sworn-in Prime Minister of St. Kitts Nevis, Dr. Terence Dew, in his first interview, said categorically that electoral reform is something he has to attack as a government, as a government. Electoral reform, constitutional reform, it has to form part of the ongoing discussion. And if not a question of youth, we saw in Grenada, a young attorney, 42 years old, took over the reins of government. So again, that's what I'm saying, young people, I think, and in both St. Kitts, Nevis, and Grenada, young people were a driving force behind the election, and women in particular. And what we have now at our disposal, compared to in my days, we have the social media is there with us. It comes in several shape or form. And like Paul said, we can use that to our advantage. Young people can use that to their advantage. But on the electoral reform, I'm not sure, Lofty, if you heard, and it may have been aired a while back, but again, I think we have to resurface it for what it's worth. There was an audio clipping on the matter of electoral reform by Senior Councillor Stephans, and there was also one by Minister Austri, Reginald Austri. And I think for purposes of our discussion this afternoon, I think it may be important for us to listen to those two audios as we look again at the CCJ's report. So I'm not sure if you have it, but I think we can listen to the first one, which is Senior Counsel. Listen carefully to the comments that he made and the statement he's making on the matter of electoral reform. And then let's listen to what the comments that Austria is making on the matter of electoral reform.
All right, so we're taking Astafans first, right?
Yes.
All right, let me see if I could pull that up. The latest comments of this brother here, this legal brother. Let's try this.
Yes, in fact, I can tell you that the former president of CCJ, Civic has been asked to conduct public hearings on election reform in Dominica, and I can assure your honors that these are all issues that are going to come up within the province of recommendations to the parliament. Legislative reform is required, and the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of the Commonwealth of Dominica has made it clear that they are going to have hearings on election reform, headed by none other than Sir Dennis Byron.
All right, that is Senior Counsel Astafan. One more time.
Yes.
Before I give back to you.
In fact, I can tell you that the former president of the CCJ, Sir Dennis Byron, has been asked to conduct public hearings on election reform in Dominica, and I can assure your honors that these are all issues that are going to come up within the province of recommendations to the parliament. Legislative reform is required, and the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of the Commonwealth of Dominica has made it clear that they are going to have hearings on election reform, headed by none other than Sir Dennis Byron.
All right, it's
excellent. Yes. So that was Senior Counsellor Stefan. Before I comment, let's listen to Minister Austri.
Reggie Austri. Let me see. Hold on. Reggie. Let's see this one.
So you will never find a proper explanation as far as the United Workers' Party is concerned on this issue of electoral reform. But these guys have us engaged in a debate that they know is a nonsensical debate. They keep shifting the damn goalposts on electoral reform every single moment. To the extent now that the opposition have decided that they will not accept no report from Sir Brian. They will not accept it. The report that was presented by one of the most prominent legal luminaries in the region. And they're saying to you up front that we don't care what in the report. We don't care what Sir Brian said. We will not accept it. These guys are on a mission to wild up their supporters and to cause their supporters to cause mayhem and destruction in the country. Something that they have been attempting for years. If you go back to even before, but if we use February 7th as a starting point, and them guys have been trying for years to get people out on the street, including this march of hate and jealousy that they're on right now every Wednesday. These are garden fertilizing and breeding disruption to breed hatred, to breed chaos, and to breed confusion in our country. And they're hoping that this electoral reform thing, they think it's sticking and resonating with their supporters. So they're hoping that once they cry electoral reform, they'll have another chance of bringing people onto the streets and to cause destruction, to burn down people's property, and to kill and to shoot people. That is the motive of the United Workers' Party with this stupid debate on electoral reform. We're wasting energy trying to make sense out of a nonsense notion that the United Workers' Party is nonsense. And they're sitting there, they're laughing at us because we spent a whole week we've been spending talking about this damn stupid electoral reform nonsense. We will not win that battle because every time you believe you're winning, the United Workers' Party will shift the goalposts. And so it has to be left now to the Dominican people to read through that nonsense and to dismiss that as garbage and rubbish and bullshit.
All right.
Anytime I hear Austri's voice, it is always very hard for me to listen to him. But you are the guest this afternoon, and you asked for it, so here you have it.
Well, yes, I can understand and I can empathize with you, Lofty. But it is important. It is extremely important.
Yep.
Because bear in mind, Reginald Austri is a minister and a senior minister. So I'm not here making comments in the person of, let's say, Reginald Austri as a person. He's not my friend. I don't know him. I guess he himself don't know me. But he made comments as a senior minister, sitting minister of government. And I've said on this program before, to him much is given, much is expected. So when he makes a comment, it's not the same as maybe an ordinary citizen making a comment, with all the vehement and with all the accusations he made in his comment. But what is interesting though, and the reason why I wanted you for us to start up the program with this parallel, if you listen to senior counsel, he said in no uncertain terms, his position may or could have changed since he made those comments. But he said in no uncertain terms that legislative reform is required. And he went on to say, I can assure you, he's speaking as senior counsel, which represents to a large extent government's interest. I can assure you that the whatever legislations will be brought to Parliament for necessary action. And he went on to say that the former president of the CCJ, very esteemed, learned individual, would be the one charged with the responsibility of undertaking the reform. But then you hear Minister Austri making some very troubling comments, I would say, very troubling comments. Comments which in my view seems like inciting, because they like to talk about inciting people, but inciting that people are going to burn down the town, people are going to shoot, people are going to kill, and all of those kind of motives are coming out of his mouth. And in one point he said the CCJ, the esteemed authority, but the UWP doesn't want to agree with that. And he referred to the electoral reform as nonsense, as BS. And this damn stupid thing. I mean, here you have, Lofty, a minister, sitting minister of government, and that a senior minister, referring to the question of electoral reform in those kind of, in that kind of manner. I mean, if the minister would have just do a quick little Google and check the definition of reform. When we speak of reform, electoral reform, social reform, whatever reform we speak about, the word reform from a noun standpoint means improvement or an amendment to a situation that appears to be wrong. From a verb standpoint, it is to change to a better state, to improve. That's what reform is all about. Okay? To improve an existing law or practice. This is what reform is about. So if we're talking electoral reform, forget whatever he may feel or may not feel, as from a political standpoint, what he feels the UW may or may not. Electoral reform is necessary. And let me take it one step further, because he mentioned CCJ in his submission. The CCJ, of which Sir Byron was the first president of the CCJ, have issued a report calling for electoral reform, saying to Dominicans that we should not undertake another general election unless we undertake some reform. Is he now saying that is damn nonsense too, and that is BS? Is that what he's saying now? Is he saying because forget whatever the UW people may or may not want, the CCJ that he referenced in his comments, as he think is credible, has said in no uncertain terms that we should undertake some form of reform before the next general election. I would like to know whether Minister Ostry is saying now the same comments that he expressed, that this dumb, stupid nonsense, waste of time, stupid debate, is he referencing the CCJ's position now on reform in those same lights? And that is why it's important for us to don't just dismiss those comments. You know, very other striking comment he made in that, we will never win. Those were his words. He said, we will never win. So inherently, he's saying that he recognized that whatever the process is not good. And if we were to fix that process, the Dominican Labour Party would never win. Lofty, it's important. It's extremely important as we move forward that we do not dismiss those comments. We listen to those comments and we hold these guys feet to the fire. We hold their feet to the fire. Action comes from keeping the heat on. Action comes from keeping the heat on. And we have to keep the heat of electoral reform on. No politicians, no, I repeat, no politicians, whether it is in Dominica or elsewhere, can sit on a hot issue if you make it hot enough. No politician can sit on a hot issue if you make it hot enough. And the people have to make this issue hot enough, so that we can get the results that we deserve as it relates to electoral reform.
True, I agree with you. Basically, I was not turning down the importance of Ostry's words by any chance, by any stretch of the imagination. What I was just saying is that whenever I hear Ostry's voice in particular, the self-acclaimed Rottweiler, his words are always very hard for my ears to process. That is all.
Okay.
So
okay.
it was a little, the minute and a half, 2 minutes, it was a little painful to my ears. To listen.
Okay.
That's all I was saying.
I understand. But having said that, though, I think we have to get to the point where we have to program our minds, program the ears if need be, to hear it, to listen to it, to dissect.
Yeah.
And because I'll tell you one thing, Lofty. The only reason why he was ranting and raving the way he was ranting and raving in this issue is because it strikes a nerve.
True.
It strikes a nerve. That's why he found it, one, important enough to comment on it, and to comment on it in the manner in which he did, it strike a nerve. So the point I'm trying to make is that Dominicans must continue to keep this issue hot enough, as I said, since no politician will sit on a hot issue if you make it hot enough. And action only comes from keeping the heat on. So we got to keep the heat on as it relates to electoral reform. And let's have him respond. He may, after this program, he may come with a response. He may or may not. I don't know. As I said, my comments and my observation as it relates is in terms of his position as a Minister of Government, Regional Austria, and nothing to do with Regional Austria as a person.
Yeah.
But he made this comment as a Minister of Government. And I think it's just appropriate that we as Dominicans have that obligation to critique the comment. We can either agree or disagree. And those of us who have a little more common sense that God gave us, the little common sense that God gave us in our brain, to be able to analyze what has been said as it relates to a topic as important as electoral reform.
True. All right, Brother Alvin, our time has basically come and gone. I will give you your final thoughts in just a while, but let me just run through some of the comments that were generated here during the course of time that you came in. Someone is asking here by the name of Marshall Lawrence. Question for your guests: is legislative reform necessary to conduct a re-registration exercise? That is one question he's asking. And also to implement voters' ID cards. That is the other part to the question.
Well, I wouldn't say it is absolutely necessary. I wouldn't say that. We can do the re-registration right now, I would think, based on the current regulation or the whole question of ID card. As a matter of fact, you can correct me on that there was arrangement put in place for the question of ID card. And for whatever reason, the whole thing was placed on hold. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily follow. However, given the comments made by Justice Glasgow, when he threw out the petitions, and he pointed out that there was a patent non-compliance with Section 17 of the regulation that deals with the question of the supplementary list, and the registry list of electors. And even the CCJ made reference to that and said, even if we do not do anything, this is an area that needs to be looked into. It would seem to me that, notwithstanding the fact that we can carry that exercise outside of some sort of legislative framework, that we need to look at this legislation and to pretty much find out what of the provision in the regulations that were patently not complied with, and what would have allowed that to happen. Yeah. And if so, what measures that can be put in place so that there cannot be any non-compliance of that particular section of the regulation. And bear in mind, as I said earlier on previous programs, this is what you call the engine. I mean, this is the list that is distributed and sent out and say, hey, Loftus' name is on the list, Alvin name is on the list. This is a bona fide list, and this is the list that we're going to use moving forward for the election. And if there appears to be a patent non-compliance, clearly this is something we have to examine for what it's worth.
Yep. Final comment here before we wind down things here. John Alfred is writing, it is persons like the Rottweiler Austria that have the Electoral Commission from doing its job.
Well, yes and no. Again, yes and no. I think Andrea, the young lady that was on your program earlier on,
Petra,
Petra, said that the power is in the hands of the people, you know.
yes.
So it's not in the hands of Austria. The power is not in Austria's hand. I mean, we gave him that power and we can take it back. We can allow him to abuse the power to our disadvantage or to our advantage. So again, I don't think we should take that approach that it's like the hand up in the air. He's a quote unquote Rottweiler and therefore he can do and say as he wants and we can do nothing. No, the power is in the people's hand. And as I've said earlier on this program again, there are several approaches to this thing. I think Paul Barron put it quite well. We've seen the Arab Spring uprising. We've seen young people taking up situations and change the course of history. So I am one that believes that whatever he does or whatever he's allowed to do is as a result to the extent to which we, the people, the citizens, allow him to do and get away with it. And that is the reason why we must not dismiss lightly when he makes those comments. We should not put those comments away. We must constantly play those two comments side by side. The comments of senior counsel, which says that legislative reform is required, and went on to say he can assure you, and went on to say that the former president of the CCJ is going to do it, and basically spoke in favor of reform. And the comments of Austria, which has an opposite view. We must constantly play that in the minds and in the ears of our listeners and Dominicans, so they know who they're dealing with and they know how to respond to the current situation.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much, my brother here indeed. Yes, thank you very much, Alvin. Always a pleasure listening to you each and every Sunday. I want to just alert the people as well out there that Brother Alvin Thomas has took it upon himself to come to the platform of Civic Vibes every Sunday to just ventilate, as it were, the CCJ report and everything and anything that surrounds the electoral machinations in Dominica. So Alvin, on behalf of the Civic Vibes team, brother, I want to thank you publicly for taking time off your schedule every Sunday to come and help educate us, to come and discuss, come and help, you know, deal with the issues as you see it from your own.
The pleasure is mine, Lofty. Yeah. But and let me say, I think this is important enough to say, we should not get tired of the topic. We should never get tired of the topic. Between now and whenever that next election is due. And we should use, as I said, as our blueprint, the comments and the reports and the suggestions or whatever you might want to call it of the CCJ report. We should not get tired of this topic. So I would hope and urge our listening public, those who are listening to us now, those who could go back and listen to the recording, and those who need to share it out, that we should not get tired of it. Just as I said, the sun will shine, whether it's a bright or gloomy day, electoral reform will remain. So it's a pleasure to be there, and I look forward to having a discussion on that particular matter in the future.
All right, Brother Alvin, thank you very much again for your time. Thank you very much. See you sometime next week.
All right.
All right, my brother. All right, folks, that is it. That is where we must bring down the curtains on things here as it pertains to yet another Civic Vibes program for the 14th day of August, 2022. The first leg, the first segment of the program where Brother Paul and Sister Petra engaged us this afternoon. It was quite riveting indeed. And so we want to thank both of our formidable guests who made themselves available here this afternoon for that all-important program. Well, we are just winding down here with Brother Alvin Thomas, who always keeps us on our feet, as it were, with the level of preparation and education that he brings forth to the table. So again, we want to thank Brother Alvin for being here with us this afternoon. Just before I go though, let me just run through some notices here or some announcements here. The first I want to put on the record here is that I really want to thank Brother Issa Banton. We had that discussion this a while ago about young persons in Dominica doing or not doing enough. They are so disengaged. I want to publicly thank Issa Banton for what he keeps doing every year in terms of that fete in Grand Bay. That I must confess is not one of my favorite fete, as it were, in terms of attending or attendance. But when a Dominican is doing something good that benefits, well, primarily his community, and Dominicans by and large, you know, go out there and have a good time. And I must say kudos as well to the patrons this year. There, I didn't hear any major fightings at that fete. So I want to kudos to all those of you who attended and at least behave yourself in a manner that we Dominicans know how to be. So Issa Banton, take a bow, you and your crew who continue to do good things for Dominica as a young person indeed. All right, what else we have here? Well, I said already Paula wasn't here. Paula is sick. So those of you who have Paula's number, please give her a call. Wishing her some speedy recovery. Also, too, I just want to highlight before I leave here, there's a situation that is still unfolding in the village of Biosh, that is on the west coast of Dominica, close enough, that is. Brother Euron Vidal, patriotic Dominican, gone missing last Thursday, it was, yes, Thursday. It is said on the ground that he went fishing, and up till now, not a trace of Mr. Euron Vidal from the beautiful village of Biosh. I was down there last evening. As a matter of fact, I went on a search for this brother. I was taken on a boat, but we were unsuccessful. The search continued today, still unsuccessful, the last I heard. And so I just continue to pray and ask the good Lord above that he intervenes in that matter as it pertains to the whereabouts of a very patriotic Dominican, that is Mr. Euron Vidal. So those of you who know his family, those of you who know his relatives, you can reach out to them, give them a call, say something kind to them in their moment of grief at this time as they continue to search for their loved one in the name of Mr. Euron Vidal. Well, for next week's program, part 2, our guest this afternoon, Miss Petra, she gave her confirmation that she will be with us next week, and also Brother Paul. So you guys can look for part 2 of that conversation of the young people with our guests here that we had this afternoon. Also, I'm also looking into engaging a brother or someone from an organization in St. Lucia sometime, where just next door people, St. Lucians are, sorry, I'm getting a feedback. Yeah, St. Lucians next door, they are doing a very important deed in terms of their sector, the manufacturing and processing sector. And so I've reached out to at least a body in that organization so that they could come and just give us in Dominica something that has been eluding us for some time in terms of the manufacturing and processing industry here in Dominica. Trust me, you don't want to miss that discussion, what St. Lucia, just across, is doing as it pertains to their resources, taking their raw resources and basically turning them into finer stuff. So we look forward to that discussion very, very soon in the future, right here on Civic Vibes. Anything else note of saying here before I leave? Oh, the cricketing fans out there, at least you have something to cheer about this afternoon. West Indies won the final T20 match versus New Zealand by 8 wickets. So at least they saved some of the embarrassment by not having New Zealand walk home with the series 3-0. So they won the last match, but New Zealand basically won the competition by they winning the 2 first T20 matches. All right, so West Indies saved some type of embarrassment this afternoon. So those of you who love your cricket out there, that is the final score. West Indies won the last T20 match this afternoon by 8 wickets. They had, I think, 145 runs to make, and they made that in reasonable time, all right, with reasonable wickets in hand. All right, Dominicans, those of you who are still there with us, let me just acknowledge some of you before I close down. Eliza Louise, good evening to you. Ronnie, Roy, Antoine George, Victor James, John Alfred, David Joseph, Sylvester Joseph, Miss Law, what's that? Lovey, yes, Lovey. Good evening to you. John Alfred, I mentioned your name already. Juanita Prince, good evening as well. You are there with us still. Marshall Lawrence, you're still there. Antoine George, Christine, and Nicholas, you're there. Judith Cochran, good evening to you. Brother David Joseph, I mentioned your name already. Was quite active on the live this afternoon. Thank you, Brother David, for your participation. Royston Francis, good evening to you. Margel Durand. Lofty, I missed out, but I got the final bit. That is Margel Durand reporting. I know why Margel Durand was lit this afternoon, and I can tell you for sure it is because of that cricket that was being played. If I know Margel Durand very, very well. Margaret Wallace, good afternoon to you as well. And thank you as well, Margaret, for doing what you do on your live, your Facebook engagements. I normally take some time to listen to you as well. And for sure, in that youthful movement that we are trying to get off the ground, Margaret, your name is Dong. So please expect a call from one of the team members here, because we realize you may just have something to contribute to the young people in Dominica based on your pronouncements thus far. Marvella Defoe, you are there. Good evening to you. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Jaira Hector is saying that he missed a couple programs, but when he tuned in this afternoon, the information is still right up there in terms of the education factor. So Jaira Hector, good evening to you. We have Norma Ito is here. What's that? Francis, good evening to you. Darin Ayad, good evening. My friend, Laini Alifam, good evening to you. Brother Pat Corbett up there in the north, good evening to you. Dorian Dorival, well, Claudia Sanford, Ezra Winston over there in the French territory, good evening to you as well, my brother. I did not get to read your comments, but you know, you are always there for us. Keith Roll, good evening to you. Yes, and that list continue to grow and pile on. Clyde, Gregoire, Everlasting Peter. And so we just want to thank each and every one of you for taking